No, I'm pretty sure that's James's Peach. We opened this week with, oh wait, hold on, I gotta do this first. Hi Aoyama, I see you lost your reading glasses again. Anyway, Mashiro was just hanging out at home, as everyone else was busy with something else, including her grandmother, who partook in horseback riding? Hope that artificial hip holds out, lady. But yeah, as has been established with her big character arc ever since the beginning of this series, Mashiro was trying to figure out a productive career/pursuit of her own. Elle would seemingly serve it up to her in the form of a bunch of picture books. Hold on, I think you forgot the part with the James Gordon rat. Traffic was held up for that movie. But yeah, the princess had her read her a bunch of books, including a reused asset. Gee, imagine if they referenced this story again after we just spent a whole episode about it. Oh wait. Later, our protagonist decided to partake in some good old product placement, as Agiha had gotten a job at that one chain that'll never go away in this franchise. Though, to be fair, at least this was the first time in a good while that they've been to the Pre-Holic, compared to, say, the season that originally introduced this store and... That giant sardine girl told you to say that, didn't she? But yeah, Akiha's co-worker named Natsumi had drawn this picture of the ocean for the store, but only later realized that it had a lot of empty space, so she took Mashiro's unintentional advice, and of course drew a very pink-haired mermaid in the middle. Well, at least she didn't give her an ahegao. This resulted in her complimenting the directionless hero girl, saying that she had some good artistic sense, even though drawing a mermaid in the middle of an ocean background is kind of obvious. But whatever, I guess we just needed something to get this episode's plot rolling, as then she suggested Mashiro take part in a picture book contest. Okay, 1, y'all are kind of infringing on Yui Nanase's gimmick, and 2...
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Like, again, this is all stemming from an offhanded remark, so it's more than a little presumptuous to assume Mashiro would be interested in making picture books. Thus, they pretty much needed her friends, in particular Sora, to push her into doing it, which, at the very least, will benefit a scene later in this episode. Anyway, while picking up some art supplies, they also bought Elle a sand building kit, which she happily played with at the park, and oh god, what was with that toddler's hands?
She had man hands.
It would have also been a good spot to brainstorm picture book ideas, but Mashiro was already running into some writer's block. Again, already kind of been done. But yeah, in spite of being a decent comedian, Mashiro had to admit to herself that she didn't have the skills necessary to write a picture book. Gee, it's almost as though this was haphazardly pushed onto her. Thankfully, this was at least acknowledged by Sora, leading to a nice moment between the two, where she told Mashiro that she shouldn't have to stress out too much about finding her own unique skills. This awkward friction that the hero girl had created would carry out throughout the episode, but first they had to deal with their princess who was going through her selfish phase. Too real, just too real. But yeah, of course this would give Mashiro the burst of inspiration she needed. With that, she spent the next few days focused on getting her book done in time for the contest. Sora was rightfully concerned about her friend pushing herself too much, especially after she gave the initial shove. Thus, she at least tried to quietly support her friend the best she could by giving her some tea. Well, there's my favorite part of this episode. I don't know, I just appreciate the subtlety of this whole scene, with Sora trying her best not to disturb Mashiro, and yet while the latter was focused on getting her book done, she still took the time to recognize her friend was there, and appreciate her trying not to disturb her. Good stuff. Anyway, after another montage for this season, Mashiro had finished her book on the day of the deadline. To make matters worse, because I guess he had nothing better to do like kidnapping a princess, Botamonda decided he could best spend his time by inconveniencing his mortal enemies. Yeah, I take back any compliments I gave this dude as a villain. Anyway, he created a traffic light monster, which, yeah, guess what the gimmick is going to be for this thing. And the Cure's transformed, and we finally got the full transformations and group pose, and I will give props to Agiha for doing the Kamen Rider double pose. As for the actual transformation, though, they unfortunately seem like they're just gonna focus on the Spotlight Cure, and won't even try to distribute these sequences evenly. Welp. But yeah, the fight was an Aoyama fight, alright. I especially love how this one angle made it look like the Romborg was only punching with his right hand.
I'm gonna get you eventually.
It did at least start to become interesting when it used its obvious gimmick. However, compared to say a similar monster from Doki Doki, this was probably one of the weakest examples of Zawalding, as the Romborg was affected by its own spell, except for a brief delay after going green. As a result, while it could dodge attacks, it wasn't capable of effectively counterattacking. Thus, all it could do was stall. Sure, it was getting in the way of Mashiro meeting her deadline, but as a fight in this series, this was just plain old weak sauce. Granted, it did at least lead to a nice exchange between Mashiro and her teammates, encouraging her to just go ahead and let them deal with the monster. Meanwhile, Mashiro, for her part, wanted to prioritize defeating the monster, showing herself as a good hero. Fortunately, she wouldn't have to choose, as Agiha got out her little palette and cast a convenient debuff immunity on Sora. How did they know they could use such an RPG tactic in this sort of a fight?
The answer is don't think about it.
With that, they appropriately defeated the monster with a Final Fantasy attack, and Mashiro made her deadline. The next day, not too surprisingly, her book was about L and encouraged the toddler to share, which, yeah, is a pretty nice message about influencing the next generation with our own works, even if frankly Mashiro's art kind of sucks. Thus, I do kind of appreciate that the episode ended with her not winning the contest, and yet the publishers went through the trouble of printing and even hardcovering a whole book for her. Nah, whatever. I'm not gonna bother overthinking an episode like this. Anyway, cameo cure this week was Hibiki. Well, I'm almost up for a game of Splatoon. Anyway, this episode was by far the most meh episode so far. While the story had its moments here and there, much like Mashiro herself, there wasn't much to this, and it probably could have used some editing. For a Mashiro Spotlight episode, this did its job of fleshing her out just a little more, but as a piece of pure entertainment, well, I think I can understand why they gave this one to Aoyama. Of the main characters of the season so far, Mashiro is the one I'm most concerned about in regards to her characterization. I think she's still in a good place relatively to other second cures of previous seasons, but she still needs stronger episodes than this. I'm guessing her being the white cure of this team is meant to be symbolic of her being a blank canvas that needs to be filled in. Thus, I do like the idea of her trying and practicing different career paths, and picture books is even thematically appropriate for this show. However, the execution here was very lacking, with her just kind of haphazardly trying to enter some arbitrary contest, which makes it hard to get invested in her conflict when she wasn't even invested in it until some one-off character mentioned it. Sure, she did get a groove for it eventually, and some of the interactions she ended up having with her teammates, like Sora, who felt bad for badgering her into it, were good, but other than that, it was a predictable story, and the payoff was just kind of eh. And while I would normally complain more about Aoyama's animation, I'm also kind of glad they didn't waste their budget on this subpar tale. That said, that fight still sucked visually and just from a conceptual standpoint. And overall, while I won't call this outright bad, I can say this is absolutely one of the most skippable episodes of this whole season. Please, writers, start filling this poor girl's canvas up with a few more colors. She certainly isn't going to be able to do it herself. In spite of some busy stuff in my personal life, we have made some good progress on the third part of the Fatai review. And at this rate, it should be out sometime early next month, and around that time we'll also start tackling some different content for this channel at least. Look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, happy Father's Day, and Oh, better go before it changes.